I think it's pretty obvious to everybody in this room that it's getting to be a problem. A lot of folks can't even park on their street anymore when the people start coming downtown. And that's just going to get worse as the area grows. We are sort of a victim of our success. So we have to find other things that we can do. Better use of the decks, better use of what on-street parking does exist, and then also promote alternatives such as a trolley, which gets people around without having to park in downtown, and find other ways that people can get here, more use of the Uber and Lyfts, more people can use sidewalks and more pedestrian to get around, and then be...
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Monroe, you wanted to respond? That'll be the final response to this question, sir.
10 months ago, I was appointed to the Downtown Parking Advisory Committee, and just a few months ago, I was the first one after listening to Mr. Smith and so many representatives from Row about the residential parking concerns. I was the first one in probably 7 years to lead the vote and get a residential parking permit past the DPAC, and that's going to be going to council. So there is enough parking, depending on who you are. If you live in the residents of Old Wilmington area, there's not enough parking because it's being abused, and that's the issue that we need to fix. That's the vote I led on the DPAC.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to start with the second round of questions, and we're going to begin a second round of questions with Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, the redevelopment of the wave maintenance facility on Castle Street is the issue. Do you support the current proposal to contribute to the former wave maintenance facility to a mixed-use development? If not, do you have a better idea?
Well, I'm not familiar that we're doing the mixed-use development that I'm aware of is further up 3rd Street. So as far as if you're talking about mixed use, there's long-range plans to bring train in there, but that's a wish at this point and way down the road. I do support the project. I'm very excited about getting our people who use public transit off 2nd Street and have under cover from the sun and the rain and everything else that they've had to deal with, and make it so pedestrians downtown can use 2nd Street a lot easier and not have to wade through people waiting on their buses. So very supportive and excited about the project.
Any other responses to that question? Mr. Lawler, go ahead.
Sure. The Wade facility on Castle Street is a great experiment to see if we can have a mixed-use project with some affordable housing. One of the things they're proposing, which is really cool, is what they call live-work facilities. We have sort of a front room that can be your office, and then part that'll be your residence. So that can be a great example. We're waiting to see if the financing can happen, see if all the details can be worked out. But that may be a great model for Wilmington in the future, and a great little stimulus to Castle Street.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Spears, you'd like to respond, sir?
My only concern about Castle Street and the mixed-use proposal is that how much affordable housing are we going to get there? That lot is not that big, so I don't really see that affordable housing making that much of an impact here in the city.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Coyle, we're going to go to you for the next question. Do you think the city of Wilmington pays competitive wages for essential employees like police officers and firefighters? If not, would you prefer to raise taxes or reduce costs in other areas in order to raise the funding?
I think.
Go ahead.
I think the city is paying competitive wages, and I think that should be extended across not only the other city employees, but to the vendors and also to the partnerships that we have. For instance, with waste management, we should have permanent employees out there, and the city should work to support those kinds of initiatives. But absolutely, I think that we should support our firefighters and our police services, just like we support all the city workers, and they should have the support they need to live inside the city.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you are the first to raise your hand if you'd like to respond, sir.
Yes, on Channel 8, the government channel, city police officer starts out at $35,000, and auto mechanic is listed at $41,000. So a guy that goes out there, puts on a bullet-resistant vest, and goes out to protect our citizens makes $6,000 a year less than the guy that fixes his car. So I don't think we have enough money to pay these people, but we do need to give them a pay raise. I think if you listening to Chief Evangelist talk, he's having trouble keeping mid-range police officers. We have a great starting salary, we don't have a good mid-range salary.
Ms. Spader, you had your hand up. I'm going to let you, since this will be your first response.
I think if we're gonna take affordable housing seriously, we have to think very strongly about wages. If you wanna operationalize the definition of affordable housing, it's 30% of your salary goes toward all of your housing expenses. That's a good thing to think about in terms of what our retail market value for housing is in this city and what our starting salary is for public servants, because if our city doesn't take the first steps in letting the business community know that we're serious, we can show them we're not serious by what we pay our public servants.
Ms. Haynes, you have only one response, so I'm going to give you the last one on this question.
Thank you. We have a 3-year program to assess the pay for public employees, for our safety employees, fire and police, and we have worked and have finally gotten them up to market rate. It took us some time to do that, so we did not have to raise taxes, and we have moved from basically paying lower wages, and what we were doing was running a training school for fire and police. We would get them on board, we would train them, and then they would be hired away by the county or Brunswick County or somebody else. So we have gotten our wages up to a market rate so that we can hire and keep good employees.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And you might as well just keep the microphone because the next question's to you as well. The city gives Wave Transit $1.4 million every year. Do you agree with this level of support? And if not, what would you propose as a level of support?
We have taken Wave Transit out of the ditch more than once, this city has. And that is just one figure of what we have put into them. We have to have public transportation, but we need public transportation throughout the county. And the county has to become more of an equal partner with the city to fund public transportation, and we have to create a public transportation system where we have a choice rider, someone that chooses to ride, not someone that has to ride because they don't have any other type of transportation. And once we do that, we'll be able to have fares. The federal government's pulling out of everything, and we've taken so much money in Wave from the federal government to buy those big buses, and they're more efficient and all of this sort of stuff. But they're pulling out. We've got to come up with a better system. We've got to have better partners, and we've got to create a system that's clean and desirable so we have choice riders.
Any other responses? Mr. Lawler, go ahead.
Yeah, we need to have the county be more of a partner in the Wave Transit system. We need a good, useful bus system for the future if we're going to get people around this town. We can't put everybody on the roads. We have to have the alternatives. And there's some good things going on there. You've heard me talk ad nauseum about the downtown trolley, but that's an experiment to see if we can have a bus that will appeal to the choice riders that Margaret just talked about. We also if you look at the new multimodal center that's being built, you'll see that's an attractive, they're using wood there, so it's going to be an attractive facility. So we have to find ways to get the choice rider on, and we're taking steps in that direction. But we need the county to step up.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Scott, I'm going to give you the final response to this question. Sir, go ahead.
There are other indirect financial ways to support Wave Transit. For instance, designing neighborhoods that actually serve bus ridership better with walkability and bike lanes that allow the first mile, last mile type of ecosystem to work better. So we can spend more money on the city in a way that actually makes Wave more attractive and more effective. And if I have enough time before the bell, here's an experiment. Imagine if in certain areas parking was increased to more than the cost of the bus fare. You'd incentivize the buses, wouldn't you? So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying think about that as an option.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lawler, I'm going to ask you to respond to the next question. Sir, do you favor public-private partnerships in the area of community development? And can you give us an example of when you think they are appropriate strategies?
Yeah, I think public-private partnerships are something that have great benefits if we're really leveraging additional dollars. Is it working? Okay.
Yes.
I was very critical of the project on Water Street because I didn't feel that was a public-private partnership that met my standards for a good investment. When we talked about the facility on Castle Street, you could call that a public-private partnership because we have the land and we're working with a private developer to turn that into a nice mixed-use project. So I think there's a lot of those. We alluded earlier to some of the money that goes to nonprofits. That's a form of a public-private partnership where we contribute to an arts group and then they're spending their money in arts that helps arts for the community. Some of the things, there's a nice partnership going on with the Downtown Merchants Association, the WDI, and some of the others to grow downtown and grow the economy. Those are all forms of public-private partnerships. So I think those can be very useful for the community because they help extend what we get for our tax dollar.
Any other, I'm going to Mr. Sappho first and then Mr. Smith.
I think the public-private partnerships have been one of the great things that we have been able to accomplish in bringing PPD back downtown, which had the opportunity to give us the convention center land and really start the revitalization efforts in the last 15 years. Brought a lot of people downtown, made a significant investment, and they only get paid when they create the jobs and make the investment. The other one, which is a big one for this community and for this area, is the film industry. That is a big one for our community. Good paying jobs, good clean jobs. We fought like crazy for that tax credit. It went away, but we at least fought for the grant, and we're improving it, and I think that we have a lot of illustrations of good public-private partnerships that brought a lot of jobs.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, you wanted to respond as well?
Yes, before we get involved in these private-public partnerships, what I'd like to see is what the return on investment is going to be. And I think that should be public also. I think we should all know what our money's going to and how we intend on getting it back. And we don't have to get it back in cash, but how is it going to benefit us? So return on investment analysis would definitely help it, at least make people feel like they have a better idea of how the city is spending our money.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to move to the next question. Mr. Monroe, I'm going to ask you the response to the next question, sir. Given the area's anticipated growth, do you envision the transportation system in the city's future changing to include rail access?
Mass transit in our city, that's a big project. It would be phenomenal, and you see it work in other cities. Here in our particular city, I don't see it in our near future. The funding and the capability to install that in our city, let's focus on what we need to right now. Let's fix our wave transit system. Let's build communities within our communities. Listen, if we can build out our community, if we can zone appropriately so you can work in Pine Valley, you can live in Pine Valley, you can shop in Pine Valley. Let's focus on the things that we can do right now. Of course, we'd love to have a mass transit via rail, but that's an incredibly expensive proposition. You know, if you look at how Charlotte's done that and what they've had to spend to accomplish that, and then in some ways how that divides the city. So let's focus on what we can do today as policymakers to zone and build out a city worthy of having.
All right, Mr. Anderson, you want to respond, and then Mr. Coyle.
Yes, John. I do envision a day when we have rail. A lot of people focus, I mean, it may not be in my lifetime or many of us here tonight, but a lot of people focused on the rail realignment project where it's just getting the trains moved out of the core of our city and passing through it. But the second leg of that project is to put a trolley service in that corridor on those tracks, which basically encircles the 1945 and a little bit beyond city limits. So, and if you look on a map and see all the apartments and all the density there that could use that very easily, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coyle, you also wanted to respond to this question, sir.
Yeah, I think we absolutely should be planning for and fighting for and achieving the kind of light rail system that we need to really supercharge our regional and statewide economy. And the reason we need to be focused on it now, even if it seems like it's something far off, is that you can't add it later to the plan. We have to have it in the bridge. We have to have it in the city and county plan. We have to be planning for it now. And you have to have a vision of how you take on difficult projects, like confronting Chemours and DuPont and shutting them down and forcing them to fund a light rail system.
Thank you. Next question is going to go to Mr. Sappho. Mr. Sappho, do you believe there's any further potential for shared services between the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County? If so, in what areas would they be?
Well, there's always opportunity for shared services, but you have to have a willing partner, whether it be parks, whether it be planning, whether it be zoning. There's a lot of different things that we can work together on. And what I usually do is sit down with the chairman every single year to go over a list of things that we can work together on. There's a lot of discussion in those meetings. Sometimes they say to me, Bill, we're just not gonna hear that, or we'll work with you on that. So we work together, we try to at least identify things that we feel that we can come together and work. Wave transit, of course, is an important one. Affordable housing is also very important. Any kind of redevelopment that we can participate in would be great. And I would love to see the county come back out from Marketplace Mall back into the city. Now that would be an opportunity to maybe do something on Project Grace, where the city and county could do something downtown and really make it a magnificent building and really reuse that building downtown. That's just one example, but there's many examples. We have to work together on transportation initiatives. This is just not the city, this is the county. Every major roadway in this city is owned by the state of North Carolina, so we have to have a working relationship. And in addition to that, we also have to work with our partners in Brunswick and in Pender County, understanding that 22,000 people today live in Leland, and a lot of them come into the city of Wilmington every day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any different responses? Mr. Spears, I'm going to allow you to respond next. Go ahead, sir.
I want to see the city and the county work together on two major things. One being New Hanover Regional Medical Center, and the second thing being New Hanover County Schools. I think that the city of Wilmington should have more input as it relates to these schools, where we have an overwhelming number of schools who are failing.
Next response, Mr. Anderson, you wanted to respond, and then Mr. Lawler.
I was going to point out, they have worked very well together on addressing our economic development plan, which is tied around something called the Garner Report. And every year we've met the last several years and we have a long list was produced, and we try to attack the lowest hanging fruit we can find, and also set a goal for the long range plan. And we've had some real successes there, and the schools have been involved as well with the vocational high school that has started out with the Cape Fear Community College. That was one of the early goals, getting gas and water and sewer over to the 421 corridor for manufacturing.
Okay, Mr. Lawler, you wanted to respond, sir.
Yeah, economic development is one I want to mention. The Garner report, though, is heavily focused on recruiting industry to this area, and there's some other areas we need to work on. We need to work on how we talk about this area so the people interested in this community are interested in the quality of life that we all enjoy and help to preserve that as we grow. We need to recognize that our future is some of the new businesses out there, so we have more Live Oak banks, more N2 publishings, more Castle branches. We can get more of those and have a better economy here. We can strengthen our tourism business so it's not so summer focused, so those people have year-round work and help some of our small businesses. But that's an area we can work with the county.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Scott, I'm going to ask you the next question to respond, sir. What do you see as Wilmington's competitive advantages, and what sectors should the city be focused on in order to power economic growth?
Thank God for this question, because this is my favorite conversation. First off, we have a huge amount of, no one's going to deny our ecological resources. We are so unique. We are surrounded by water, and we are a unique marshland. We have our Venus flytraps. We have flora and fauna that is unique to us and can't be taken away unless we destroy it. It's something that comes with Southern charm, with our oaks and with everything else. And this leads into what Councilman Lawler was talking about regarding our quality of life and attracting that. This ties in very well to the fact that we have really done a great job with our biotech, our marine bio. Our entire geography is a laboratory for what we specialize in educationally. This further goes into opportunities to double down on intellectual properties, patents, work with our entrepreneurs, which is also a regional asset. We have people who are clever and want to be here just to be here. And I've seen it working with a lot of my clients and with other people in the entrepreneurial industries. That's why we do have some of those businesses like our Enstinos and our Untaps. These three things, the people, the cult, that's my answer.
Any other different viewpoints? If not, I'll move on to the next question for Mr. Smith. Flooding in downtown could continue to impact new mixed-use development and already existing structures in the stormwater system. Question, what adaptive measures would you propose to help mitigate the flooding issues and to protect property and infrastructure downtown?
Well, I don't know if there's a whole lot that we can do infrastructure-wise, because, you know, you just build the wall higher, the water's just gonna go higher, it just keeps on going. But future development and current development, all those have to take into consideration that Water Street and that area and across the river, because somebody's looking at building across the river, I heard. So they have to take that into consideration. We have to make sure that we do not allow people to get away with cheating the system or doing things halfway. I think the water, it's a tidal river. It's going to flood twice a day, or it's gonna back up twice a day. So when there's rain upstream, we're gonna have flooding. So I don't know if we can coerce the people further upstream to do a better job in managing the water that's coming down towards us, but something needs to be done upstream, because we're at the very end. There's not a whole lot we can do at this end, but take care of what we do downtown and try to mitigate the water there.
Thank you, sir. Any differing viewpoints? Mr. Coyle, I'll let you respond, sir. Nobody else raise their hand. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think we need to be very calm and cool-headed about what we're going to do, and we should begin immediately considering the engineering solution we have to these flooding problems. They're not going to be going away. Regardless of your ideological position or your past philosophical statements, the water seems to be getting higher, and so we should be taking steps in terms of how we build our built environment, and also in how we address our economy to take into light a balance with ecology, and that starts also.
Thank you, sir. Any other responses? Mr. Monroe, you'd like to respond.
So let's look at the city's essential services and essential roles. One of those is our streets. We have to maintain our infrastructure. In my little neighborhood over in Pine Valley, I have 5 sinkholes on my street. They've been sitting there for a year. The city continues to just dump gravel in there, hope they'll get better. Infrastructure is essential. As a fireman riding around the city, when it flooded and pulling people out of cars, I saw it firsthand. Down on 16th Street where it floods every time. Out on New Center Drive when it floods every time. It's the city's job. We've got to find the money in the budget, and we've got to take care of our infrastructure.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to move on to the next question. Hello, Ms. Spader. I'm going to ask the next question to you, ma'am. What would you do, or what do you think should be done to reduce the number of abandoned properties inside the city?
I mean, that goes hand in hand with affordable housing. It seems like that would be something the city could invest in to probably partner with non-for-profits like WARM or Habitat for Humanity to talk about taking those homes and revitalizing them, saving them to the extent that they can be saved, and then turning them around and finding some way to turn them into affordable housing. Should we make them into a duplex perhaps, or should we consider how to maximize the space and maximize the utilization of that space?
Any other responses to that question? Mr. Scott?
I think one of the big issues is making sure people are aware of things that can be done, partnerships with, for instance, Warm and Habitat, information regarding the $125,000 credit to revitalize downtown homes for affordable housing. And also an interesting thing I've been looking at that I haven't determined would work in Wilmington, but certain cities have been successful with vacancy taxes that incentivize getting people into homes. And that's something that I would love to see, being able to incentivize giving homes and making sure our buildings are adding to the economy.
Mr. Smith, and then Mr. Anderson. Go ahead, Mr. Smith first.
Well, I think what we need to do is try to intervene earlier while the houses are still salvageable. I don't know, we have a great code enforcement. I don't know if we need to beef up code enforcement so they can keep a better eye on the houses that are abandoned. I have 2 on my street right now that are empty and are starting to fall apart, and the homeowners don't live here in Wilmington. So I don't know what we can do, but I think if one house hasn't been repaired since Hurricane Florence. And if we wait much longer, it's not going to be salvageable, but it's in the historic district, so it's only gonna be either a very rich person that can afford to come in and fix it, or it's gonna be a corporation. If we can...
Thank you, sir. Mr. Anderson, you wanted to respond, sir.
I just wanted to add that virtually all those ideas or comments, the city pursues today, and I see that you would think are easy, obvious solutions. But what always happens for us,
There you go.
it turns out there's six descendants, and the reality is getting 6 of them to sign the doggone thing and let us get on with it turns out to be an insurmountable problem. People that have no interest in the property, but just you can't find them, or they won't all sign it, and it's that's something we need to figure out.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Spears, I'm going to ask you to respond to the next question. Should city council remain an at-large body, or should council members be elected by districts? And explain your thoughts.
I think district elections are a good thing. That way we have a more diverse representation of what we see as for council. What we see now by being at large is not very representative of what Wilmington is or what Wilmington is going to be as we talk about the growth of Wilmington. So district elections are a good thing, and I think we are the last pretty much large city in North Carolina not to have it. So I am in support of district election. Not right now, but later on.
Ms. Haynes and Mr. Schaffner. Ms. Haynes, your response first.
Yes, very quickly, I have administered elections for a number of years in Virginia, and also here was the chairman of the Board of Elections for 5 years, so I understand elections and I understand how to run them. And district elections are not a good thing for the city of Wilmington because we are much too small. You will have neighborhood fighting neighborhood, and the bigger, wealthier neighborhoods will always win. The other thing is, now you have 7 people that represent every person in this room, everybody that's a citizen. But if you have district elections, you'll have that one person in your district that you vote for, and they will represent you, and then if there are any at-large seats, so you will diminish your representation and the people that will help you.
Mr. Schaffner, you wanted to respond, and then Mr. Scott.
Well, I'm not against district elections, and I think that we can look at them, but I will also caution you that the state legislature would love to draw the district lines. And if we're going to gerrymander council elections, then when the Republicans are in, well, they're gerrymandering the way they like to. When the Democrats are in, they'll gerrymander in the way they want to. That's what's wrong with Washington today, is gerrymandered districts. And I, for right now, would not be for it unless the citizens of this community could come together and draw it for their own city. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Scott, you wanted to respond, our final response.
I just want to point out some of the problems that Mayor Pro Tem Haynes pointed out exist. There are neighborhoods that are disproportionately represented based off of wealth or zip code. There are neighborhoods pitted against neighborhood, and we do see these things. When you have an opportunity to make the problem better, and the problem might still be there, but you have made progress, you have to take those actions. Because it's still there. It's already there.
All right, that is going to end the first part of round 1 of our forum. Next, we're going to allow the audience to ask questions for about the next 15 minutes. I would like you to direct your question to a council or mayoral candidate, not just say, I want to hear what everybody says. I would like to have your response or your question to a specific candidate, and we will have each one of the candidates take a question. So if your response is to Mr. Anderson, the next one will have to go to somebody other than Mr. Anderson. Okay, I don't want just one person answering the next 10 questions. So is there anybody from the audience, if you want to come up here and ask a question? My cord's not that long, so I'm going to bring it over here if you would. And just a warning, I'm not going to give you the microphone. I did that once and never got it back. All right, what's your question, sir, and to who?
Question to Neil Anderson. The city has lost a substantial proportion of its tree canopy over the last few years due to drought and storms. Would you support an online or an A-line item in the city budget specifically for the planting and maintenance of city trees?
Yes, sir, and we have one. We've doubled our investment this year. There's layers of that. We've hired more pruning more staff to go out and maintain the trees we have, and we're investing more in trees this year than any year in history.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hold on, ma'am, I'm coming over your way. I'll hold the microphone. Go ahead.
This question is to Harry Smith Jr. And I'm wondering if you would think it would be worthwhile to make sure that the city parking decks have greater police on each level of whatever. I, for one, will not use them because they're dangerous and you could get mugged. And it's better to park on the street. But if they had people on each level, I would feel safer in using them. You're talking about they're underutilized?
Okay, understand. Mr. Smith.
I don't know if it would be cost effective to put a police officer on every level, but maybe we look at putting in security cameras and to be monitored by police officers or the people at the gate. I understand the safety issues. I think that when you go into a parking deck, I don't have the problem, I'm 6'4", 250 pounds. But some people do have that problem of walking through a dark area. So I think making sure that the lights all work and to make sure that we have security cameras to make people feel more secure.
Okay, any other members of the audience? Can you step up this way, please?
I don't need a mic.
Okay.
I have a question for Mayor Saffa. Yes. What's your opinion of Airbnb downtown?
Okay, thank you, sir. Your opinion of Airbnbs downtown, Mr. Safa.
Well, it is the Uber economy. And one of the things we talked about for over 2 years was to study the issue. We had a lot of input from people that were against them and people that were for them. And I believe that we came up with a compromise plan, limiting or capping the number of STRs, making certain that they would be registered so we know who the owners were, and that today the state of North Carolina is looking at our ordinance as a model ordinance across the state of North Carolina, because this is an issue that's not happening only in Wilmington, but throughout the state.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hold on one second, ma'am. I'm going to ask this young man right here his question.
This is for Mr. Coley. You had mentioned sustainability. Do you have any plans for infrastructure for electric cars?
Mr. Coyle, infrastructure for electric cars.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of what we should be looking at in terms of our engagement with the county and with Wave Transit. The way in which photovoltaics is best applied is to the built environment, and the city is a large landowner here. We also control a variety of underutilized areas at brownfields, and so that built environment becomes a generating facility for the electricity, which is the fuel for the transportation system.
Okay, ma'am, who would you like to ask your question to?
Paul Lawler. I am a small business owner, and I've had a really big problem recently with panhandlers and homeless people coming into my place of business. So I'd like to know what you want to do to make the city safer and protect the small business owners.
That's a tough one. There was a court case a couple of years ago that severely restricted what we've been able to do, and so we've got staff working on that to see what kind of options we have. We have to look at places that they congregate, that folks congregate. Greenville, South Carolina does something interesting I'd like to see us explore. They have a group of 4 nonprofits that they work with, and when they find somebody who's homeless or panhandling, they help the person get to that group, and then you've got the social service agencies that are out there. We talked about the partnerships earlier that are funded, so they work with those groups, so those organizations can help people find a place or whatever help they need.
Okay, thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am, for the question. Any other? Okay. Please try to ask it to somebody who hasn't had a question yet, okay?
Mr. Scott, if elected mayor, what would be your plans for repairing the infrastructure in certain parts of town that have been left behind, potholes and such?
Thank you, sir.
So regarding any place that's been neglected or underrepresented, the idea, and it's not an attractive answer because it's so simple, is to not neglect them, to simply make a survey of all these places and make sure there is equitable development. And equitable does not just mean that you develop everywhere. It means that where you do develop, where you do repair, you find ways for that to benefit everybody in the city as well. And there are numerous ways to do this. I'm going to run out of time shortly, but it's really not an attractive answer because it's so simple. You simply stop neglecting areas you represent equally, and you make sure you do your job.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Can you step up this way now? I'm running out of microphone. Please ask it to somebody who hasn't had a question yet.
Thank you all for serving and being willing to serve your community. Question for Ms. Hayes. I understand that the city enjoys a A+ rating. What is involved, what are the rating agencies looking at to make a determination like that? And where does that fall in terms of, what do you have to do in order to meet those very, very high ratings?
Well, I think you are talking about our financial ratings. Yes, so what they take into account is our budgeting process, and how stable we are. It would just be like a bank assessing your own financial statement, how you're spending your money. The advantage of having the great rating that we have now is that we can borrow money at a lower rate. And that is why we have to keep our AAA rating. It's really a complicated issue, and I'm dying to answer all of these questions that people are asking here. It's so frustrating to sit here and not get to answer them. But our financial rating is extremely important in managing the city so that we can borrow money more cheaply. We have to spend money wisely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Would you step up, please?
I had a question for Mr. Monroe. I knew that you were speaking about workplace affordable housing. A quarter of the people that work in this population are tourism, retail, servers, line cooks. Is there any way that we can have affordable housing for the people that actually work the entire tourist trade that makes this city go round?
Correct, and I would classify those as our workforce housing. They absolutely need to make policy and make decisions at the city level to assist those. I'm very familiar with some of the plight in Nashville and the issues with the musicians and their inability to park down